Hello all, welcome back. Hope you had a great session. Excited to be at this closing session. You can see everyone just filtering in behind me right now. I'm going to have a blast in just a minute. I'm going to get to interview Austin Ramirez. I hope you enjoy that, and then there'll just be some closing remarks. You're going to get a chance then, hopefully, to just connect up with folks. Again, the whole purpose of this is to connect with each other, to connect ideas. And so even though the conference is about to be over, we hope that you've made some great connections here, both things you'll take back to your class, but also some people. So if you haven't done that yet, say hi to somebody, reach out to somebody. If there's somebody who said something that was particularly interesting in a session, reach out to them, send them an email, drop it to them, and maybe sign up for a Zoom sometime later just to follow up on the conversation. So thank you all for joining me. I'm going to be back at the very close of this finishing section, but enjoy.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're just about to enter into our final session here before departures. Please take your seats if you can. Thank you. So the power of connections has been prominent throughout this conference. I hope you've really enjoyed all of the workshops and sessions and socials and chances to connect with people we haven't seen in a while. What we would really like you to do is use Mentimeter one more time, because we want to make sure that we collect all of those takeaways that you have right now before you forget them, before you're getting on your plane. And what we would also encourage you to do is, after we build the word cloud that the Mentimeter will deliver for us after the interview with Austin Ramirez, then we will also send that out to you so that you have something to take back to your campuses to really spark conversations about what you all learned from this conference. So as you're getting out your phones and getting that QR code, you snap that, and we will return to those results shortly following the next presentation. And so now what I would like to do is introduce our final presentation, which is a conversation with Austin Ramirez, hosted by Joe Tranquillo.
The world runs on connected systems, quite literally. Automotive and off-highway applications depend upon systems, their components, and the talented teams who engineer and manufacture them. Austin Ramirez is the president and CEO of Husco International, a global engineering and manufacturing company that provides hydraulic and electromechanical components. Under his leadership, the company was designated a global growth company by the World Economic Forum and recognized as Wisconsin Manufacturer of the Year. Austin served as a White House Fellow on the National Economic Council and is a member of the 2018 class of Henry Crown Fellows at the Aspen Institute. In addition to his leadership in business, Austin is an active citizen of Milwaukee with a passion for urban education. A frequent volunteer in the community, he is also co-founder of St. Augustine Preparatory Academy. Get ready for a multifaceted view of connections. Please welcome to the stage, Austin Ramirez.
Thank you so much, Austin, for joining us. This is a real treat to get to do this, and I know that we're all going to learn a lot from you in the next couple minutes or so. Just to kick things off, I know we saw a little bit about you in the video, but we got to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm gonna I don't want to say embarrass you, but if you Google your name, and you all can go do this, one of the first things that comes up is swimmer. So can we just start there?
Yeah, sure.
Swimmer. Why did that pop up?
All right, before we go there, first of all, it's really a privilege to be here, and I want to start with what the ending message is, in case some of you get bored with the talk or have to catch a flight. You all may not know this, but you are my most important supply chain partners. So I want to say thank you for the work that you do, because Husco wouldn't exist without entrepreneurial engineers. And I know that sometimes you don't see the straight line between the work that you do in the classrooms and the impact that it has in industry, but I will tell you it is critically important. And in fact, if I had to pick one single competitive advantage that the US economy has, it would be entrepreneurial engineers. So I thank you for the work you're doing, and just ask that you keep it up. So thank you. Yeah. Swimming, yeah. So when you think about your personal identity, I still, even though I haven't been a competitive swimmer for, more than 20 years, I still think of myself as a swimmer. It was my main sport growing up. I swam in college. I studied engineering kind of as a hobby while I was pursuing my swimming career, and got the chance to competed for the United States and World Championships and Pan Pacific Games, and never the Olympics, which unfortunately is like the ultimate barometer of amateur sports success. But really had a great career and learned a lot in terms of formation of who I am and what my character looks like through swimming.
Yeah, and I hope we can pull on that character a little bit more throughout this, because I know that your swimming and many of the other experiences that you've had have informed the way you approach your work, approach your life. So I know we're going to get to dig into that a little bit more. Another thing that I would love to dig into, and it was mentioned in the video, was your time in the White House, which was at not only an interesting time, but I think, I'm going to let you share the story, I think.
I warned Joe, if we start talking about politics and my time in the White House, we might not get to anything else. But I was fortunate enough to spend a year working in the White House on the National Economic Council as a White House fellow. And just by happenstance, I was there during the presidential transition. So I got to serve two presidents that may be as polar opposite as any two presidents have been in American history. And I don't just mean ideologically, just character-wise and approach to life and management-wise. The Obama White House was very process-driven, very careful, very controlled. The Trump White House was very entrepreneurial, very personality-driven. I'm trying to be kind to both, right? There's no partisan messages here. But getting to have that experience and see how politics work and don't work in two very different administrations was formative as a business leader in some ways, and also just as a citizen. And one of my main takeaways, one of my main frustrations of being in DC was that our elected leaders, our policymakers, by and large, aren't very good problem solvers, right? Every problem that they approach, the first lens that they approach it through is through the political lens. Is how is this issue going to affect the voter that votes in my primary, not even in the general election, my primary election. And this drives a decision-making process, a problem-solving process that is really backwards. So as someone who considers themselves entrepreneurially minded, that was hugely frustrating to meet lots of policymakers who knew what the right thing to do was, and so often didn't do that thing because of political calculus, not because of rational analysis.
Wow. So you mentioned character on the one hand, and problems being entrepreneurial on the other. Where do you see those two intersecting, right? The need for character in entrepreneurial thinking. I think many of us, we all know we have our 3 C's that we know and love, but a number of folks who are here are also thinking very deeply about character. So where do you see those two intersecting?
Thanks for teeing that up. So I sit on the Kern Foundation Board of Directors. And one of the things that gets me most energized about their vision for their work is changing culture through these two themes, right? Entrepreneurial-minded engineering as well as character formation. And to me, they're inseparable. And in fact, they really feed on each other. So I hope you adopt the 4th C. I think it's critical to forming those statutes that you're making out of marble. If we're not doing it with people with strong character and strong moral compasses, then I think we're missing a big opportunity. And it doesn't have to be through any sort of religious frame, right? You can approach virtue and character and ethics through a religious faith angle or through secularly. But I think thinking about that and incorporating it into how you think about training the next generation of engineers is really critically important.
So you're running a big company. What does entrepreneurial mindset look like within a company? We're all used to thinking about what it looks like from the educator's perspective, but what does that look like to you as an employer?
Yeah, it's kind of the air we breathe, right? So for me, great science, great engineering with no practical impact on our customers or on their customers is a non-value-added activity. So everything we do, in fact, one of our 3 core values is we use a language of practical innovation. Innovation by itself may be interesting, but has no business value unless it is practical for our customers or their customers in terms of how it's impacting their value proposition. So it's the air we breathe is thinking about being entrepreneurial as we do business.
So I want to pull on that thread of being entrepreneurial. On the one hand, you could say, okay, well, I run a business. I know what I need to manufacture. You're a systems engineer, right? I'm a systems person too, right? We like to say, oh, well, the value add is going to be to like rethink about the system and squeeze the last little drops and pieces out. What actually pushes your company out of the box to not just think about those little things around the margins, but actually think big? And we heard this in our last keynote, right? What are some of those bigger goals? Maybe it's not about going to space or understanding what thought is or things quite that big, but what are some things that actually push and motivate your company to not just do the incremental pieces?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we create a culture where we reward people for taking risks. That's another core value of ours, and celebrating people for thinking big. But I'll tell you, to bring it back to your 3 C's, having great big ideas can easily fall into that category of innovation without practical impact. And I think the key for us is the connection piece. And for us, it's connection with our customers. And I could tell a string of stories about incredible technologies that we developed at Husco that we thought were paradigm shifting and industry shifting. But if we did it without impact from our customers and their feedback onto what they actually needed to solve their customers' problems, it just becomes a lot of interesting thinking without a lot of impact. So it's a combination of thinking big, coming up with the ideas, but also connecting it to our customers through relationships.
One of the other things that I know a number of folks in this room think about is the power of story, right? And so as an educator, the ability to motivate students with a story.
Yeah.
Some of us call it a hook, right? And so this is not just here's a homework problem, tell us what the size of this pump should be because it's cool and you should love pumps, right? That'll work for some folks, but there's a lot that go, why, right? And so I think what a number of folks in this network have discovered is the power of putting our students in the perspective or talking to customers. So we're going to maybe we can pull out a live hook from you. From Husco that we can use in our classes. So do you have a story of bringing that customer experience into your company and making some maybe unexpected insight?
Yeah, sure, and I love that. So the best example I can think of, we developed, so we make hydraulic and electromechanical systems. One subset of our business is developing the main controls for all sorts of mobile equipment, so think like large excavators. And in fact, large excavators are the single biggest segment of the off-highway equipment market. Their hydraulic systems today are almost exclusively supplied by Japanese suppliers. So for about 2.5 decades, Husco has had a mission to break into that part of the business, and we developed a very highly innovative independent metering, cartridge valve, distributed energy reuse system for large excavators, and spent tens of millions of dollars and over a decade developing that system. And it worked. It worked, double-digit fuel efficiency benefits for our customers, and we were just thrilled to take it to market. And ultimately, were unsuccessful because our customers, when we introduced this technology, they were so focused on there were some new engine regulations that were coming through the market, so they had other priorities other than what we thought their priorities should be. And ultimately, we made this huge investment that was a market failure. Right, but then taking that back and kind of reconceptualizing the technology and coming up with new ways to use some of the fundamental concepts in creative ways to actually solve our customers' problems, that what could be called a failed innovation has stimulated a huge wave of growth in kind of spin-off technologies for us.
I love that, and you actually just naturally went into what I was going to ask next, which was, what did you learn? What did you take away from it? So you learned something about that particular piece and that particular failure, but that idea of reaching out to customers, finding out what they are, is that something that has now spread throughout the company, is checking in with the customers regularly about the things that are in development, even if those things are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years in the future?
Yeah, we probably, if I think about the allocation of our engineering resources, only 5% is kind of done in a vacuum, meaning without an active customer. That may not be a customer, like a production program, but some sort of customer engagement. If we don't have that, it's just typically not worth spending our time on. We'll do a little bit of experimentation. You need to have some of that, but if there's not customer pull, it's really hard for me to reconcile putting resources against it.
Okay, so Keen, this is going to be a timeout. You got to get like a clip of that, and then we need to send it out so that we can play it for our students so they actually believe us when we say that. So that would be fantastic, and I'm sure they're going to cut this video up and right, we'll all be able to use it. So that's great. I love that. You started with this of kind of the theme of this conversation was going to be what advice kind of we could have here. We're a supplier for your company of labor, of insight, of skills and ideas. What do you look for? Right? So, obviously there's the credibility of the engineer. We all know that. That's something that we all need to be thinking about, and that's a grounding. But what are some of the differentiators when you're sitting across from someone or some member of your team is sitting across from someone interviewing one of our graduates? What are the things you're looking for?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. We're really good at screening for technical aptitude, and in fact, technical aptitude is really important. I don't mean to downplay it. But that's usually not at the top of the list of what impacts folks' career once they get into industry. So what do we look for? We look for cultural fit. One of the questions we ask is, if you buy a new toy, what's the first thing you do? Do you open it up and start playing with it, or do you sit down and read through the instruction manual and make sure you fully understand how it works before you start playing with it? Right? There's not a right answer to that question, but we have a profile of person that answers that question a certain way, and that's what we look for. For us, it's people that are more biased towards doing rather than just thinking. So that's one example of how we do that. Engineers are the lifeblood of my business. It's the single largest hiring category that we have. And when I meet with new engineers, the most important, I usually give them two pieces of advice. The first one is focus as much on cultivating your temperament as you do on building your technical skills. And this gets back a little bit to the character discussion. But the technical stuff, it's relatively easy and straightforward. The temperament piece, it's harder. It's a little bit amorphous and ambiguous, and tends to be harder for engineers to embrace that. But the people that thrive at Husco, and I think in industry in general, are people that have technical skills that are astute, yes, but that are great teammates and that can demonstrate empathy, and that people want to work for or work with or be around, that have a good attitude, that they're smiling, that they don't get spun up when things go wrong. And so we really encourage our new employees to think about that, to actively think about developing their temperament along with their technical skills. And then the other piece of advice I give is, you got to be great at your day job. That's really important. You'll spend the majority of your time solving technical problems for us. But find those things at the margin that you're passionate about and invest into them. And that's what will likely make the difference in your career, right? You got to be great at the day job, but the things you do with the extra 5 or 10% of your time that may be hobbies, they may be being on working on recruiting for Husco or a volunteer thing, those are the things that are going to both give you fulfillment and purpose, and they often lead to unexpected chains of events in your life that really have outsized impact versus the amount of time you put into them.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. In terms of that purpose, I think often our students are thinking, where am I going to find that, right? And so it's not to say all companies do this, but I'm curious, how do you set up structures at your company so that it's not just a day job? What are some of the things that you do at Husco to help that not just be I'm coming in, I'm a drone, I do my job, I go home?
A key part of our employee value proposition is who we are, right? Husco is a private, family-owned business, and I'm CEO. My number one job is to build a great business, and I think that is a fundamental good. I come from the philosophy that business does good things. We pay taxes, we employ things, we solve practical problems in the world. That's a fundamentally good thing, and I'm proud of that. But at Husco, as an owner and leader, our vision is to use the success that we generate through our business to have an impact on the world, right? Both corporately, as the ownership family, and also there's an expectation that every employee is out making a difference in their community, representing the company in effective ways. And that's nobody comes and interviews at Husco or takes a job at Husco without really understanding that and to some extent embracing it. And then The first employee orientation meetings that I do, it's one of the things they're charged with, is you have an obligation to be out doing something to make the world a better place. And we don't define what that is, but you need to be doing something, whatever you're passionate about.
So I'd love to follow up on that in two ways. One is, can you tell a personal story of how you are a role model for that? Going out into the community, working with the community, having this be more than just the position that you hold. But then if you don't have to give their name, but an example of an employee who's come in and sort of embraced that idea of giving back.
Yeah, so many examples. For us as the owners of Husco, we've been highly invested in urban education. My parents, that's always been a theme of their philanthropy. It's also very important for me. In Milwaukee, we've got some of the highest achievement gaps in the country when you look at our poor, mostly minority urban kids versus their suburban counterparts. And to me, I find that morally offensive, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And our family, has worked on systematic things to try to improve the educational ecosystem in Milwaukee. And we also built a school, and I'm super proud of that. We are in year 6 of operations. We're the top-ranked K-12 school in the state of Wisconsin, and every employee of Husco knows that's something that their work contributes directly to serving these kids that need it. So I'm really proud of that. An example of the culture we created. So like every other manufacturer in the United States, we've been really wrestling with labor shortages, and over the last 18 months in Wisconsin, we had an influx of Afghan refugees. And really, with no impact, no input from me, one of our operations leaders reached out to the Lutheran Social Services, the Refugee Resettlement Agency, and was looking to find a way to help find employment for these refugees that had settled in Wisconsin. And we now have 30 out of only about 130 employees in one of our factories that are Afghan refugees. And it's amazing because it's a win for us, right? It's solving like a real business problem I have in terms of finding and retaining great staff, and it's also having a real impact on this community. And I think that's, again, nothing that I did, except for creating this sort of cultural environment where we celebrate those things. We hire people that care about making a difference and being great at their jobs. And I think when you do that, like the tentacles go everywhere. It's just like you. When you're teaching these kids entrepreneurial mindset and you're inculcating strong character in them, you may not see every impact that those kids have out in the world, but it's happening. And I think it's the same thing when you think about a business culture.
So I loved this idea that entrepreneurial mindset is a way of thinking, but what you turn it towards could look like something in the business sector, but it could also be in your community. It can also be, it's a set of things that you do and who you are that you take with you. And so that's...
You could almost call it a set of character virtues. You
could. And I think some of the folks here were probably nodding, saying, yes, absolutely. So I would love to actually pull on to the 3 C's just for a moment.
Yeah.
Is there one in particular that resonates with you? So this is creating value, curiosity, connections.
I mean, I feel like I've hit on creating value and connections. Just a quick story on curiosity. About half our business today is electromechanical and hydraulic components for passenger cars. Today it's mostly internal combustion engines. We're obviously thinking about how that evolves in the world of electric vehicles. But we built that business organically. So historically, we were a supplier for off-highway equipment. In the late 90s, we identified the automotive segment as a market we'd like to penetrate. We didn't do it through acquisition. We did it through internal product development. And maybe not internal product development, because the first program we won was a design that we licensed from, it was an entrepreneur that had developed a unique suspension system configuration. And we licensed the design. We got it sourced with Daimler at the time, who awarded us what was at the time the single largest engineered hydraulic system that they'd ever purchased from a non-European supplier. It was our first program in the automotive industry. And our engineering leader looked at the design that we licensed. He said, I don't think it's going to work. I think we're going to have problems when we get to design validation testing. And on his spare time, he developed a backup design, and on that extra 5 to 10% of his capacity, progress this design so that if we had a failure, we had something to fall back on. And sure enough, it turns out the original design that we licensed didn't work. It couldn't survive the robustness requirements of this application, and we had to pivot to this new design that, thankfully, we had an engineering leader who was curious enough to recognize the problem and actually, take initiative to come up with some ideas that allowed us to solve the problem. And ultimately, if he hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be here today because we'd be bankrupt.
Wow. Power of one employee.
Right.
That's incredible. And it actually is an interesting piece, and you've mentioned this a few times, that ripple effect, right, that happens when an individual does something because they care, wherever that's actually coming from. Does that employee know?
Yeah, we try to make sure they know. I mean, probably not all the time.
Okay.
But I think part of creating an environment where people will take risks and do things like that is celebrating it. And getting back to stories, we have kind of like a library of lore at Husco that we tell over and over again that emphasizes cultural attributes that are really important to us. And I think that's part of our strategy.
Wow. So I'm thinking about this through the perspective of an educator, and beginning where you started in this idea that sometimes as educators, the ripple effect that we have isn't felt or seen. In fact, usually it's not right away. Mm-hmm. It's something that takes a long time, and often we don't even see it. It's something that goes out into the world, and we hope that we're doing the right thing. Yeah. So as we finish up, do you have a whole group of engineering educators, not all engineers, but folks who are actually working with engineers regularly? What advice would you give to us that then would actually come into Husco or other companies that you would say, this is really what I want? This is something that you can begin seeding early enough so that when they come to me, I'm not retraining, right? I'm not changing to right, fit my culture. It's already happening.
Yeah, I think you're already doing it. And my encouragement is just keep it up. Don't give up. I know it's hard. It may feel like you're not accomplishing your objectives in the moment. But I'm so grateful for being here. I've heard about the Key Network and I've seen it through my foundation work, but until I can actually be in a room and see the passion that you all have for these concepts, it's hard to appreciate the amount of change that is happening in academia. And I am just so grateful for the work you all are doing, and I thank you for it. Keep it up. It's making it a difference, and I think you really will. You will change industry. You will change the course of this country and ultimately the world, and make it a better place by equipping these young engineers to go out and have an entrepreneurial mindset.
Austin, thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. What a great parting message as we close out our time together. And as we get ready to say goodbye, we would like to extend special thanks to the Kern Family Foundation and the many people at the foundation, as well as on the planning committee, who worked so hard to put this conference together behind the scenes. So let's give them a round of applause. Thanks to all of you, first of all, for being here, of course, but for completing the Mentimeter survey and sharing your takeaways from the time we've spent together. And we'll get that. As you can see, it's up on the screen right now. We'll keep that rolling as we depart. And so we'll also make sure that we get this to you electronically and share it with you that way. As a reminder, Engineering Unleashed is a great resource, not just for staying connected once we all go our separate ways, but also to revisit the sessions that we participated in or maybe missed out on if you had to make a tough choice between a couple of sessions. And these will all be available on Engineering Unleashed, so you can certainly go check those out. Also, one last thing, probably by the time you get to the airport, you're going to receive a link to a survey that will provide feedback on the conference, and we'd love it if you would take the time to fill that out so that we can continue to make this better. And lastly, please have a very safe trip home, and we look forward to all of us staying connected. So thank you.
Well, folks, you made it to the end of the conference. I'm sad, right? I mean, this is always tough to leave this conference every year, but we know we're going to have more. We know there's going to be more events. Stay connected with one another. That's the thing that makes this network so much fun, are the people that are part of it. So go off, do some great work. I will see you all soon.